And we welcome you to the Monday morning show on WGTD. I'm Gregory Berg. We're talking about a very important topic today, something that strikes fear in the hearts of all kinds of different people. And yet it is a reality with which many of us have to wrestle in one way or another. We're going to be talking today about Alzheimer's disease. But we're also going to be talking about the help that is available both for those directly afflicted and by those that, in a sense, surround that person, their loved ones, their family and friends, and talk a bit about the difference that perhaps they can make. I'm really pleased that we can have with us today on the morning show two members of the staff at the Kenosha County ADRC, the Aging and Disability Resource Center. Paula Clark is their marketing and programs supervisor, and Susan Johnson is their dementia care specialist. And together, we're going to be talking about Alzheimer's disease, what it is not, maybe dismantle a few myths and misunderstandings that surround Alzheimer's disease. And again, as we said, talk about some of the resources that are available from the ADRC for people who are contending with this terrible reality. And we'll also talk about some of the hope that is on the horizon in terms of some of the truly exciting breakthroughs that are just about to emerge and could make some really dramatically powerful differences for people's lives. Paula Clark and Susan Johnson, we welcome both of you to the morning show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Thank you for having us.
I'm glad we can have this conversation, and we here at WGTD appreciate all of the good work that you and your colleagues do. Paula, before we dig into this more specific topic today, maybe you could give our listeners kind of an overview of all that the Kenosha County ADRC offers to the community, that is the Aging and Disability Resource Center.
Sure. So it's a pretty wide breadth, but I'll start by saying we're a no-cost, one-stop shop. That's kind of how we frame what we do for folks. And they can either call us or stop by or set up an appointment. We serve older adults 60 plus, adults with physical or cognitive disabilities 18 and over, and children who are transferring from that child life into the adult life. And then, of course, the caregivers, the family members who are supporting all of those folks. We have a breadth of services starting with our information and assistance folks. So when you would call in our office, you would likely be transferred to our information folks. And you don't really necessarily have to know exactly why you're calling or what your questions are. And I love to tell folks that if you've got a concern and you don't know where to start, in the realm of aging and disability, give us a call. And it can be a simple question and it can be a complex question. It doesn't matter. That's what we're here to kind of sort through the weeds and help you. We have an extensive database with a lot of different information, and that's what our IANA folks are going to help you sort through. They're going to ask you questions. They know the questions to ask you. Dig into what's going on. They're going to think of things that you might not think of even talking about or asking. And it's always up to you what kind of information you share. Your information is always going to be private. We're never going to share it with anybody at all. But we're there for getting you information about assisted living or nursing homes. We have benefit specialists, so they work with disability benefit specialists and then, of course, Medicare. So if you're new to Medicare, our benefit specialists can help you with that process. We do workshops on that. WGTD is fabulous for getting that information out for us, and we really appreciate that. But even say you've got a Medicare thing that hasn't been paid. We've got something in your insurance and it hasn't been paid, and you're thinking, my coverage should have covered this, what's going on? You can give us a call and we'll dig into it for you and find out. And if it should have been paid, we're going to go to bat for you and kind of help you with those steps on making sure that that does get taken care of. We have our long-term care consultations that we do, looking into long-term care for you, helping with support monetary wise, what kind of things might you qualify to help you pay for services down the line, what helps qualify you, all of those things can be answered and looked into. We have our health and wellness program, which is so important. Looking at how do we stay fit, how do we take care of certain things. We have healthy living with diabetes, which is a phenomenal class, and these are evidence-based classes that came out of Stanford University. We've got our powerful tools classes for caregivers, and we have a whole caregiver support program that is just really tremendous. So if you're taking care of a loved one who has a form of dementia, you're going to need supports in that, and we can help with that. We also have community education. We'll go out to, say, churches and different places and educate them about different things specific or very wide about what our services are, and like I'm doing right now. We have our APS unit housed within the ADRC, and that's Adult Protective Services. So if you know someone that you're concerned about, maybe they're self-neglecting, maybe they're being abused, you think they're being abused. Financial exploitation is huge and on the run right now. We have investigators that'll look into that, and that is also an anonymous phone call. And then, of course, I did touch base a little bit earlier about our transition services. So those are folks who are young adults and they're with disabilities and they're transferring into the adult world. And what does that look like, and how do you transfer? Are there guardianships that need to get in place for parents, or are they going to be on their own? So we run the gamut and then some. And the last but not least thing I'd like to touch base on just a little bit is our loan closet, which is just a phenomenal support for folks out in the community. And that's durable medical equipment and also incontinence supplies. So it's a loan and supply closet that folks can call and ask us, do you need something? Are you getting out of, say, a nursing home where you're coming in from a hip surgery, you've just done rehab, and you might need a bath chair or a shower chair or a toilet riser, and your insurance isn't going to cover the cost of that. We can step in and cover that. Or maybe you're waiting for your insurance to cover, so we can supply that equipment in between time until your insurance does kick in. And we loan it out indefinitely. If you need it 3 weeks, great. If you need it 3 years, that's fine too. It doesn't matter.
Wow.
So.
You can see how that would make a huge difference in people's lives. Does, generally speaking, every county, for instance, in the state of Wisconsin have something like the ADRC? Or is there anything that's, in a sense, kind of unique about the way you go about providing these services?
I love that question. And yes, there is an ADRC in every county of Wisconsin. We were one of the first, and we were a pilot. But now there is an ADRC in every single county and covering the tribes as well. Some of the smaller counties may be served by multiple, or one ADRC might be serving multiple. But yes, there are. And we all run just a little bit differently, but our core services are the same. We're all going to have those benefit specialists, the dementia care specialists, the caregiver support. One thing that's unique to Kenosha County is our loan closet. And then certainly having our APS unit housed within our office is a little unique. A lot of folks have the APS, Adult Protective Services, housed in a different building or not even close by. So that's a really great benefit. Because you can just call us and then we're going to transfer you if needed.
So that kind of one-stop shopping sort of thing, I mean, and I appreciated how you framed things at the outset, that sometimes people will not even know exactly what they need or exactly what the problem is. And even when there is that kind of maybe uncertainty, people should not hesitate to reach out to you, because it sounds like you're accustomed to those kind of inquiries.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And sometimes we'll get calls that really we don't normally supply the information, and that's okay too. We don't ask that people call us, but we're going to dig in and find out, okay, maybe you should call here instead of here. We're going to do our best. We have phenomenal people working those phones.
Wonderful. For those of you just joining us on today's morning show, we have two representatives of the Kenosha County Aging and Disability Resource Center. We've been hearing from Paula Clark, who is the marketing and program supervisor, and then Susan Johnson's with us as well, who is a dementia care specialist. Susan Johnson, before we dig into the topic at hand, which is, of course, Alzheimer's disease and other kinds of dementia, tell us how it is that you came to become the dementia care specialist at ADRC. I mean, is this something that's been of interest to you for some time, or were there other sort of factors that kind of led you in this professional direction?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. And I tell people when they ask me this, I say it's my calling. I really do feel that's something I've been called to. I have a great respect for caregivers and a desire to see them grow in their role and to learn the skills and the strategies that they need in order to do that. Prior to this, I worked in Illinois and case management and caregiver support services in a rural area. And then I worked for the Alzheimer's Association in Illinois. So I wanted to move to Wisconsin and be closer to my kids, and I've loved this role.
Very good. Well, it's certainly something that is important in part because Alzheimer's is something that affects a whole lot of people. In fact, you were saying that you had fairly recent statistics that kind of point to the specifics of just how many people in the state of Wisconsin right now are suffering from Alzheimer's disease.
Right. Well, we think about maybe 6 million throughout America, and then 120,000 of those are in Wisconsin. If you think about Lambeau Field and Miller Park, American Family Field, completely full of fans, it'd be about that many people. Now, for Kenosha County itself, we're looking at more like 2,700 maybe, under 3,000. But there are probably, I'm sure there are many, many undiagnosed cases.
And of course, one of the things that we should be talking about today is Alzheimer's versus dementia. Because of course, in a sense, dementia is a bigger thing, a bigger term that encompasses a whole lot of different disorders, including Alzheimer's. But one of the problems, maybe one of the myths, is that Alzheimer's disease and dementia are one and the same. And if somebody begins to exhibit symptoms of dementia, they have Alzheimer's disease. And it sounds like you would caution us from being that careless with the terminology.
Right, and people always ask me that question, what's the difference between dementia and Alzheimer's disease? And it's a very good question because often we use those terms interchangeably. I do, even sometimes doctors do. But dementia is a general term. It's an umbrella term for a collection of symptoms that demonstrate a change in cognitive functioning. And this change is great enough to change the way a person functions in their daily life. Alzheimer's is the most common type, accounting for 60 to 80% maybe of cases, but they are finding more and more that many times, and this is through advances in science where they have better imaging, that more and more different types of dementia are combined. So you can have Alzheimer's and very often vascular. You can have Alzheimer's and Lewy body, Alzheimer's and FTD. That's different types of pathological things are going on in the brain to cause that.
Maybe you could clarify some other thing too, which is that I think most of us assume, I think with pretty good reason, that the longer we're alive, the more our cognitive function tends to deteriorate, although that can, of course, vary widely. But, I mean, in other words, a little bit of forgetfulness is normal as we age, but then at some point, that sort of normal erosion becomes something else, or it crosses a line where we think of it as dementia. And first of all, you can disavow me of the first assumption if that's not really correct. But otherwise, it sounds like the line where something becomes dementia is when it really affects the way a person lives out their lives.
Yes, that functioning part is key. And what they say is about 1 in 10 people 65 and over develop a dementia disease. Age is the greatest risk factor. Your risk about doubles every 5 years until by 85, it's more like a third of people are at risk. But there are many risk factors, age being the most common one.
Interesting. But I suppose it's also important to say that not everybody succumbs to dementia. I mean, one can live a very, very long life and never exhibit any symptoms of dementia whatsoever.
That's right. And actually, what worries us now, what worries people is they see, well, why is there so much of it around right now? You know, you're hearing about it all the time. So-and-so's mom has been diagnosed, or their sister, or something like that. But the reason is that we have such a large population that's in that age period of greatest risk, right? The baby boomers. We've changed everything from the building of grade schools now to long-term care.
Right. So in other words, that is a greater proportion of the population, so it only stands to reason that we're going to see escalating numbers in terms of people.
In fact, it's a worldwide phenomenon. You will see this happening all over the world, the aging population and the increase in dementia. But what research seems to show is that in Western countries, the rate of dementia is declining. I always like to tell adult children like that, who, like me, have a relative who had it and they're feared of developing it themselves. And they think the reason the rate has gone down, a person in their 60s nowadays is less likely to develop Alzheimer's than a person that age 30 or 40 years ago. And they think that's because of the increase in the education on cardiovascular risk factors. You know, there has been so much emphasis on heart health. What's good for the heart is good for the brain. And that's one reason. Another reason is the high degree of education, you know, building up that cognitive reserve. So I think that's good news. And it's also good news to know that, and you may want to get to this later, Greg, that there are things that we can do to reduce our risk.
We will certainly want to talk about that. That is for sure. Paula Clark, before we went on the air, you were mentioning that one of your predominant concerns, and maybe a predominant mission in the work that you do, is to really encourage people to undergo cognitive assessment. In other words, to get tested. And that up until now, and still very much today, there are a whole lot of people who are really frightened of undergoing any kind of a test of their cognitive abilities, a dementia screening, if you will, I suppose because they're just terrified of getting a really terrifying answer. Yes. So what would be your central word of encouragement for people to seek out treatment, or I should say testing or screening?
Memory screens are pretty darn simple to have, and we can do them at the ADRC, which is really nice, but they can eliminate worry. And one of the examples I like to give, which I didn't mention earlier, was that my mom, after she retired, was really worried. She was seeing differences. She's a highly intelligent woman, and she was seeing differences in her memory and started really worrying, and I encouraged her to go and get a memory screen. And she did, and there was nothing wrong with her. She didn't have any issues at all, and she still doesn't, and that was a good 10 years ago. She's 84 now. But it really took that weight off of her shoulder. And the other thing is, it can be other things. Just because you're having memory issues doesn't mean you've got absolute dementia diagnosis. It can be stress. It can be diabetes. Either you're undiagnosed or your medications need to be adjusted. UTIs, urinary tract infections, can cause memory issues. So there's certain things like that that cause it. So it's not at this big, scary, necessarily diagnosis. The other thing is just early detection is so critical. So finding out, do I have this, and what can I do to help support my brain better? And then if I do have, say, Alzheimer's, getting prepared for that, helping your family prepare for that, you're going to be better off in the long run. So there's so many different things and positives that can come out of that memory screen, whether you have a diagnosis or not. It's so important, and it's easy to do. And then if you come in and you do have that memory screen and there's nothing wrong, you have that weight lifted, but you also have a baseline for the future. So if, say, 5-10 years from now, you're kind of worried again, come in and have another memory screen. And then you can kind of see how you're doing. And Susan can talk a little bit more about that.
And we just want to be clear that the memory screen is not a diagnostic
It is not.
tool.
It is not.
The most important thing around the memory screens is the conversation that takes place. I spend about 45 minutes with a person just talking about their concerns, because what a person is noticing, what the family is noticing is key. Physicians look at this. They want to know what you're seeing. And I can't get up and down off the floor as easily as I used to. My body's lost agility. My brain's lost agility, too. You were talking about normal signs of aging versus what could be the sign of something else. So we talk about that a lot. But the screen then can show that and then I ask them, would you like me to fax this on to your doctor? And that's the next step if people allow that, or sometimes they want to take it themselves. But it's that conversation. A person may score within normal boundaries, but I can tell from the conversation whether what they're experiencing could be the sign of something that needs to be checked into. Most importantly, to find out what could be causing that. Is it something that can be reversed? Severe depression, stress, extra stress, and anxiety. Medication interactions are huge, and we take so many medications nowadays with our chronic conditions that's something you think about right away, too.
Right.
I'm so glad you pointed that out, that it's not a diagnosis, and sometimes I mix those words. And really it is just that screening, and then if Susan does detect something, or one of our memory screeners detects something, then we recommend that you go to your doctor and we'll share those results.
We go from there, but
Absolutely.
It can be helpful, and sometimes such a screening is going to give you ultimately what amounts to good news.
Yes.
That sometimes there's actually nothing wrong. I suppose sometimes we're not all that good at assessing ourselves and our mental acuity, and then on top of it, if there really is something going on, well then there may be all kinds of answers to that besides the answers that we most dread. So if people can summon up the courage to have a memory screen, it can be a good idea. So Susan Johnson, you'd already kind of anticipated my next question, which was, at the end of such a screening like this, then is it what is the result? And it sounds like it is a numerical result, and that within a certain range, there's no cause for concern. And if it is another numerical score, then maybe something needs to be done.
This is a very short screen developed by the Wisconsin Department of Health, and it was developed to test for certain types of cognitive changes, but it doesn't test for everything. But again, I have had people within normal ranges, but I know from the conversation, which is key, whether or not they need to be followed up. But it's a place to start, and it does provide that baseline.
This past summer, I was together with my 3 siblings, and my sister happens to be a medical doctor and works with the aging population almost entirely in her practice. And so anyway, just for fun, if you will, she had us each undergo what I guess amounts to a dementia screening. And it was really an interesting thing to experience. And I could kind of tell from the various questions or tasks that were part of this, and I don't know if it was more extensive than the one that you do, but you could just tell that this is about more than just remembering words, or more than just conjuring words that start with the letter F, or more than just something involving what you do on a piece of paper, and that impressed me a lot. That this kind of screening is maybe more, although it might in some ways be simple, it is a more sophisticated tool than we might assume it to be.
Well, I know what you're talking about just from your description, I think, and I am certified to give that, but that's a little more advanced than this screen. But I'm glad you brought that up, because what that screen, people don't realize that it is more than memory. Alzheimer's affects all of our thinking domains, our judgment, our reasoning, our sense of time. And that's what that detects, and that's what a person would go on. They'd see maybe a neuropsychologist. To have a complete diagnosis involves more than even a short test in the doctor's office. It involves a whole medical workup. What's going on, and to the things Paula was talking about that could be behind this. neuropsychological testing where they really examine over an hour or so what area of the brain is being most affected and what that means as far as maybe what type of dementia, or is this more likely depression? That's an important part of it. And then maybe a neurology exam, an MRI or some sort of scan to find out whether something's going on with the nervous system or with the circulatory system. Is there small brain disease? Is there even a tumor or signs of stroke? So it takes all of that, and I always try to educate families on that. It's a big part of my conversation, is how you get a complete diagnosis, and families often have to advocate for this.
Sure. We're speaking today on the morning show with Susan Johnson, who is the dementia care specialist at the Kenosha County ADRC. That's the Aging and Disability Resource Center. And Paula Clark is with us as well, marketing and programs supervisor. Susan, I meant to ask, are you the dementia care specialist, or is there more than one?
I am the dementia care specialist.
Well, we appreciate you taking time out of what I'm sure is a really, really busy schedule to talk about this important matter. We haven't yet really talked about what Alzheimer's disease is. We've kind of danced around the reality that it is, of course, a severe disorder that affects a lot of different aspects of a person's cognitive function, and needless to say, has a devastating effect on their daily life. But we haven't yet talked about physically what happens in the brain of someone who is suffering from Alzheimer's. I don't think we need to go into a whole lot of technical detail, but at least in summary, what is happening to the brain of someone who has contracted Alzheimer's disease?
Well, the scientists know a lot about what happens during the process of the disease. They don't know exactly what is happening to cause this, but they do know that the changes begin maybe a decade, maybe more, before you see this hallmark with Alzheimer's disease, a sign of memory loss. So we're talking about 50s, before that even. And what happens is, for some reason, the cells lose the ability to communicate each other, and they know it's because of the accumulation of abnormal proteins, beta amyloid and tau tangles, and those accumulate in the brain, and that can begin quite early. So by the time you have the memory loss, this has been going on for a while.
So in other words, I think they call them plaques?
Plaques and tangles, right.
And so they can begin to form in the brain without causing any demonstrable symptoms. Yes. I suppose, in a sense, until it's too late. Maybe that's not quite the right way to frame it. But I mean, that's maybe one of the sadder aspects of this disease, is that we often don't know it's present until a whole lot of irreversible damage has already been done. Well,
except we're getting better at detecting things. When people come in for a memory screen, they might go on, and I've seen this happen, and be determined to have something called mild cognitive impairment. Now, again, that is not a disease. That's a collection of symptoms that show your cognitive changes are not affecting the way you're able to function. And remember, with dementia, we said that's a key factor. But your family's noticing things, you're noticing things, and it does show up on testing as mild cognitive impairment. So once you find that out, then there are things you can do to help your brain, to help your brain stay healthier. Now, mild cognitive impairment doesn't always go on to develop into a dementia disease. Sometimes it does. But sometimes, back to what Paula said, there are reasons why you're experiencing these changes. All the more reason to have it checked out early.
Absolutely. And so it sounds like we can, through a screening like this, we might actually be able to detect relatively minor changes that otherwise, as we're just walking around in our daily lives, we might not be aware of.
Through diagnosis, through diagnostic process with a neuropsychological consultant, I would say, and with the medical exam, and maybe going on to the neurology too.
One of the myths that you pointed out, there's a list of 12 of them, and I think there are several that you wanted us to focus on, and one very, very important to talk about is this notion that, oh my God, my mother had Alzheimer's disease, and thinking of it as kind of a death sentence, that perhaps there is some way in which this trait is passed down. And you caution us to say that we should not make assumptions like that at all, that the genetic marker that involves Alzheimer's does not mean that this is necessarily passed on to anybody. Can you tell us more about that?
Yes. Well, there is increased risk if you have a first-degree relative, if a parent or a sibling has the disease also. That does increase your risk, but it's not definitive. It doesn't mean you are going to develop it. There are other risk factors too. And that can be because of a gene or other reasons. But there's a particular variation of a gene, APOE4. If a person has that, that means they're at greater risk. But there are people who have that gene who never develop Alzheimer's. And there are people who don't have it who do. So we just can't break this down into very simple statements about that.
It also sounds like it's a mistake to make blanket statements about how Alzheimer's disease affects older people. And it sounds like there are at least a few instances in which this can affect somebody earlier in life than we might ever imagine. What generally do we see in terms of the population that is most apt to contract Alzheimer's, and then but how soon in life is it known to sometimes appear?
Well, we talk about older onset, that's 65 and over, but then there's a younger onset, and that can occur between 30 and 60.
Wow.
But it is not as common. Out of the 6 million people in America estimated to have Alzheimer's that I mentioned, about 300,000 of those might be in that younger onset range. So it's a serious thing when this occurs because a person's often working, has a family and things like that, but it's not that common.
One of the things that we've already kind of talked about a bit, but it probably would be good to clarify this even more, is that when somebody is clearly experiencing what we call Alzheimer's disease, we are talking about, I think, really serious impairment that is different from the impairment that a whole lot of people experience just as they grow older. Can you help us understand the nature of the impairment and how it is different from other kinds of impairment that should not be such a cause for alarm?
Right. So typical signs of aging would be having difficulty coming up with a word. I mean, that happens as you get older, but eventually you might or you might not. But you see more of this occurring if it could be someone developing signs of what could be a dementia disease. There's actually a very good discussion of this on the Alzheimer's Association website, alz.org, under Know the 10 Signs. They've put it into Know the 10 Signs. But you might use poor judgment at some times. Everybody does, but for someone developing a dementia disease, you would see more changes in judgment. Maybe being more susceptible to scams. Of course, that's very common. All of us, I've been told, are going to fall prey to a scam at some time or the other. But what you really, now here's what you want. This is what I talk to people about. If it's changing the way you're able to function, these changes you're seeing from the way you have in the past. For instance, if you're forgetting the names of people, not just acquaintances, you don't see that often, but of people you should know their name, that would be an indication you should have this checked out to see what could be causing this. Same thing if there's a familiar store and you just can't remember the name of it, but you should check that out. But again, there are so many things that can affect our cognitive functioning. I just heard a geriatric psychiatrist in a webinar the other day say that he thinks many people are undiagnosed for sleep apnea, and our sleep being affected can have a huge impact on our cognition.
Sure.
So if you're noticing changes in your memory that weren't there before. I wouldn't even say sudden changes, but and people around you are noticing your memory changes.
Right. I, a few years ago, interviewed the author of a book about Alzheimer's called The Forgetting. I wish I could remember his name, but it's a very, very good book. And there was a documentary on television that maybe of the same name, I'm not remembering now. But anyway, a book that really explored quite a lot of this. And I remember one of the things this author said is that when somebody is experiencing, in a sense, full onset Alzheimer's disease, one of the things that's different is it's not so much like, I can't find my car keys, I forgot where I put my car keys, and you know that you forgot where you put your car keys, but that when we get to this level of impairment, this level of forgetting, you don't even remember that you have keys, or you don't even remember what keys do. That when we are aware of our forgetfulness, at least in that early stage, that is not we're when somebody is in the depths of Alzheimer's, there is a level of forgetting where they don't even, in a sense, fully understand what they are forgetting. And I only mention it to say, so it's even more important than for loved ones to be part of this, because it will often be them who will notice impairments that the person impaired is not in a position to understand.
Right, but we think about Alzheimer's in stages.
Yeah.
Early, and then you've got this long middle stage where you see those early changes increasing even more pronounced, the repetitiveness, maybe growing anxiety. And then I like to think of it as early, middle, and late middle. And then the late stage where things are really changing. But you're going to see a lot of things before that, before you get to that drastic memory changes that families will look back and they say, well, now I realize what was going on. But you don't know what you don't know, and they tend to kick themselves. And I think we've all done that.
Right.
My mother had Alzheimer's, and my grandmother, and we just know a lot more about it now, and that early intervention is key. But as the disease spreads throughout the brain, you will see more and more changes.
So who, generally speaking, comes to you? I mean, do you have people coming in concerned about themselves, or is it more often that people come with family who are really encouraging them to do this, or is it difficult to generalize that?
Well, that's a really good question. Often it's adult children calling, sometimes a spouse, but it's the adult children maybe on a trip back home that are noticing things, the things they might be noticing that are key, and this has to do with the early signs any listener might be noticing. It's just having trouble managing maybe the books, the bank accounts, the financial affairs, or things at work. It's just hard to settle down and concentrate and do the steps involved in taking things. That's really what we see. A person loses the ability to follow through on the steps. So it might be that adult child. Often a spouse. It's really helpful when a doctor sends people to us, excuse me, because the earlier a person gets involved with supports and services, the better they do, the whole family. And it is a family disease. And sometimes I have an adult child come in with the parent that they're concerned about. I always thank them for that and commend them for that, to start early on and have that conversation. Involve the person living with the disease. And I say living, not suffering. Our terminology is really important. But involve that person early on, if you can, when they can have a say in how they want things to be with their care, with their treatment, because that's person-centered care, and that's what we're all about.
So what would be some of the help and resources that, for instance, the ADRC is able to provide people for whom this is a reality, aside from this really important matter of the screenings and so on that kind of can help kind of answer the question of what's going on? But once the answer to that question is known, then what does ADRC have to offer?
Education is key. Education about the disease and its effects on the person. The first thing I give every caregiver is a nice handout I have, a pretty simple handout from the Alzheimer's Association called Compassionate Communication. often adult children they see something wrong, and we want to move right to the fix. And so much has to happen before you get there. And education is the first part. How do I communicate differently now that the brain has been affected in all these different ways? Managing behavioral symptoms begins with communication strategies. And so we start there. We start with the effect of the disease on the person, how to plan ahead. So there are education programs. I do one called Someone in Your Life Has Dementia, a Roadmap for Care. What to expect basically, generally, through the different stages, and how to prepare for that. They have to juggle the here and now. What do I do now? What does mom need now to what's going to be needed down the road? All the while they're absorbing this diagnosis of a degenerative brain disease that is progressive. It is a terminal illness. Many people come in and they don't know that, Greg. And that's something that has to be handled gently and carefully. But so a lot's going on in the area of grief and ambiguous loss, all these things. And every situation is so unique.
Sure.
And you go with where a person is. Maybe all they want is for their cell phone to work. That actually happened to me once. I had all these ideas, but she just wanted her cell phone to work so she could do this and that and make her appointments and all. And that's where you start. What is it this family needs? And at the ADRC, we are all about the options. I always tell the family, you're the experts on your family. I'm going to give you a framework of education and services and supports that then you use the way that's best for you.
Interesting. And those services would include things like what?
Sure. Sorry, I got off track.
No, it was important.
No, support groups. We have support groups, but support groups aren't for everybody. That's okay, but we'll connect you with other types of support, what works best for you. Maybe information about what's happening online. And the education, I do one-on-one consultations with people. That's usually short-term, but it can go on longer. My goal is to get people feeling like, okay, this isn't controlling me. I can do something about this. And that's the connection to the services, the education. All of that's ongoing over time. A family meets with me. Maybe they feel like they have for now, but they know, and so that's it. But they know they can always get back in touch as things change, because they will change.
Absolutely.
We also have assistance with advanced care directives, which is really important to have. So if you don't have an advanced care directive, power of attorney for health care, that's super important to get in place. What are the wishes of everyone, actually 18 and over, but certainly the person who has that diagnosis, making sure that they've got that power of attorney in place so that their wishes are written down. So if they become unable to communicate those wishes, we know what they were. They've written them down. They've said, this is what I want. That's really critical to care and making sure that they have what they want and need moving forward. So we can help with that. Susan does those. I think that's a critical piece to our care. And also financial support moving forward. What might you qualify for in getting maybe some cares at home as the person maybe declines or needs some additional assistance with bathing or housekeeping, things like that. What other supports? Our caregiver support specialist supporting that caregiver along that journey. She can do that as well. So there's a lot of different things that go into that.
Right. We do have a caregiver support specialist, Margaret Riccio, who helps with all of that and much more. And she also helps dementia caregivers.
Very good. In the materials that you shared with me was something so interesting, and that is this notion of dementia-friendly America and of trying to create dementia-friendly communities. And I think the point of this is to kind of help us kind of rethink what people in this reality most need and the way in which we could maybe most powerfully change their lives and their well-being. Talk for a moment about why you wanted to share this today.
Sure. I had the privilege of hearing some people living with early-stage dementia on a panel, and they shared how it was living with early dementia. One said people find out that you have Alzheimer's, and it's like you had this big A on your forehead. They treat you differently than they did 5 minutes before. Another person on that panel said, I may have Alzheimer's, but Alzheimer's doesn't have me. People, they're still the same. The essence of the person remains all through the disease. But yet there's such a stigma around Alzheimer's. We equate it with mental illness, which also has a stigma, undeserved stigma. And it's not, though. It's a neurodegenerative brain disease. So people want to be treated with respect, as they are who they are, and going on from there. And a dementia-friendly community then is a place where people living with dementia and their caregivers, their care partners, feel understood, respected, and a part of the community. And this needs to happen in all the different sectors, medical, schools, libraries, stores. The ADRC in the past has done dementia-friendly training in businesses. If you see a purple angel on the door, and it's a rather modern-looking angel, but if you see a big decal with an angel on it and it's purple, that means that business has been dementia-trained. Kenosha Public Library has been dementia-trained, dementia-friendly trained, and they asked for a repeat. I think this might be their third time, because here's the issue with businesses. You have some turnover.
Sure.
So you have new staff in. So we'd invite our businesses out there to update their training also.
Wow, what a great idea. And I could imagine how the benefits of that could be ongoing and wide-ranging. So.
And it happens in other ways, too. We have a memory cafe where the library hosts it for us. We have it once a month where people living with early stage and their care partners come and enjoy some time together. And a socialization, recreation opportunity. The museum does a program called Spark, same thing. So it's having opportunities for people to not only become more remain a part of the community, to even build their new community, too.
And in the meantime, you tell us, although unfortunately we don't have time to talk about it today, but right on the horizon are promising breakthroughs, perhaps new treatments. There are very few that are generally available at the moment, but it's good to hear that all kinds of work is being done on that really, really important matter of coming to better grips with what Alzheimer's is, why it occurs, and how we can maybe stop it in its tracks someday. So we can only hope for that day. Paula Clark, if people want to find out more information, access Susan Johnson's expertise, or any of the other resources at the Kenosha County ADRC, what do they do?
Well, first of all, they can call us. That's probably the easiest for most folks. And our phone number is 262-605-6646. We also have a rather robust website, and that's adrc.kenoshacounty.org, or you can just Google us and find us. But we have a ton of information on that, and definitely a dementia care section. And our Facebook page, which is ADRC Kenosha County. And I put all of our information in. If you want to find out what classes are coming up, that's a great place to just go on and take a look. What do we have coming up? We also have our events on our website. And then WGTD is just phenomenal at getting our information out. Thank you so much. Sending out those press releases. You can find out about our classes through you as well.
Very good. We're happy to be part of the good work that you're doing. Paula Clark is Marketing and Programs Supervisor, and Susan Johnson, Dementia Care Specialist for the Kenosha County Aging and Disability Resource Center. Thank you for all the good work you do, and thank you for being my morning show guest. I was privileged to speak with both of you today. Best wishes.
Thank you for having us.